Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about more victims from the list of 10, specifically number 3, which is, I got to read it because I always mispronounce it. Logitas. Girl near Loganitas? I don't know. It's close enough. But what is important is her name, Roxene Rogash. And she certainly was not the first victim of Joe Naso, and she wouldn't be the last. But this is one that I don't have a lot of information on. I did look into Roxane's background when I was investigating Joe Naso for the other murders that we're going to cover, specifically to try to get into his MO and see what was it about Roxane that led her to be a victim. And Roxene Rogash was murdered on January 9th, 1977. Her body was found January 10th, 1977. She was strangled with a pair of pantyhose, just like this. These are actually Joe Naso's that I had showed you in a previous video. I'm going to include in this episode a lot of photographs that were found during the search warrant at Naso's property, things that were collected and things that were missed, because I don't have a lot on is it Roxanne or Roxene? It's Roxene. I keep saying Roxanne. It's Roxene. But I believe that this was, if not the quintessential murder that got him convicted. Because if I'm not mistaken, it was the DNA that was found on the pantyhose or stockings found shoved in her mouth, I believe, that had Joe Naso's wife's DNA on it, which was linked back to Joe. Or the ones around her neck had the wife's, to be more specific. Because at trial, Joe's contention was, well, I didn't kill her. Why don't you ask my wife, Judy? So, again, extreme narcissist. He knows that he committed a crime, but it's just the American justice system, how it's set up. I think it's such a joke that we go through the ritual of people putting their hands on a Bible and swearing to God that they're going to tell the truth, because not one single one of them do it. They don't do it. So it's a formality, it's a ritual, and quite frankly, just like the running game in the NFL, it's a bygone era, and it's something that probably should be revisited because it's just a joke. As you saw when Joe Naso represented himself at trial and said, well, I didn't kill her. Why don't you ask my wife? Her DNA was the one who found. Come on. But Roxene Rogash, Bill Nagara talked to him a lot about this case, and I'm going to give you the bulletin points on that. Joe referred to her, I believe, as Foxy Roxy. Now, what you have to understand right off the bat is, again, her name. Roxene Rogash, the double initials, RR. Just like number 2 on the list, girl near Port Costa, was Carmen Colon, CC. Now, I want to address this before we get further into the Joe Naso series. I've heard people say, well, specifically when I was interviewed by New York Post, I think, could have been Fox News, when they asked about how because I said I believe that this isn't a coincidence, that he was killing girls with double initials. And the question, and a very smart question to me, was, well, how did he know that these prostitutes, which a lot of them were, had double initials? If it's a chance encounter, how would he know? And my retort to that would be that it's not a chance encounter. He spent time with these women. It wasn't the first time that he had picked them up. Now, do you think, let's just say 10 women that he killed that had double initials that were prostitutes? That's an arbitrary number, but let's just say that that's it. Do you think those are the only prostitutes or potential victims that he came across? Of course not. He had hundreds of potential victims, and he visited hundreds of prostitutes. He didn't kill every single one of them. So maybe he got to know a few dozen prostitutes by visiting them, and would ask them their name. And what if the girl said, my name is Patty Smith? Okay, he photographs her, has sex with her, but it just doesn't fit. What doesn't fit? The initial scheme. So she lives. The next girl he picks up, she introduces herself as Roxene Rogash. Ooh, he says. Potential. She could be my next victim. Now, I'm not saying that's the way it is, but I would say that it's a good possibility. Now, on his list of 10 and other murders, but let's just stick to the list of 10 and let's stick to the 4 that he was convicted of. Most of them, 3 out of the 4, let's see, Pam Parson, Tracy Tafoya, Carmen Colon, Roxane Rogash. 4 out of 4, they all had the double initials. But there's 2 others in there that police figured out on the list of 10 that he didn't get convicted on, but were certainly victims, and we'll talk about them, and Joe will confess to them, that do not have those double initials. Sarah Dillon, she changed her name. I believe her real name was Renee Shapiro. Could have been Sarah Shapiro, but that's me forcing a theory, and you know, I recognize that, to make it fit the double initials, but I don't want to do that. Cherie Patton, no double initials. So why are they there? Well, I can explain that rather easily. Joe Naso is not unlike other serial killers in history who have an urge, have a thirst to quench, and sometimes, as Dennis Rader described, you can't control it. You think you can, and you do for a little bit, but at some point in time, it festers, and you have to kill. When Joe Naso had that urge, and let's say he was trying to find a prostitute with double initials, but he couldn't, and that urge keeps growing and growing and growing, and he can't find what he's looking for. He can't find that prime target that has the double initials. It's too late. I got to do this. And he picks somebody, and they don't have the double initials. That's how I view it. If my theory on the double initials is that it's paying homage to Carl Chessman, which, again, I don't believe Joe Naso ever told anybody that. And the reason being is because I think that it's a it's a game within himself. Meaning, like, when I looked into his background and read his psychology report, he is extremely narcissist. He is the most narcissist individual that I have researched. And he thinks he is so smart. And by all accounts, he is. He has bad hygiene. He's a jerk. He's a thief. All these things are very true. But he is very smart. Now, I don't know how he scored on standardized tests. I don't know how he did in school. But he was very smart in the way that he murdered. And he didn't get caught. And how he raped, and he didn't get caught for many years. Now, he did have some snafus, as we'll get into. I think it was 1966. 66 stands in my brain, but I don't know. He had a rape in Riverside, California, which he got caught for. And the police basically said, well, we're not going to do anything if you move from the area. And he moved to New York. So, and here is part of that report, that police report. Very narcissistic, very smart. And I think he just had a way of internalizing this game, this homage to Carl Chessman, that he was going to kill people. He got off on that, much like the Zodiac did with taunting. Naso didn't have to taunt, but in his mind, he could look in the mirror and smirk and be like, these cops have no idea what they're doing. And that also leads me to believe, well, why he never admitted to it. In 10 years that he spent with Bill Nogueira on death row, as you have seen and you're going to see, and you saw in the show, he provided Bill with a lot of information, never expecting that Bill was going to give that information to law enforcement or give it to me, but that's what happened. So he never admitted to Bill that, number one, that double initials had anything to do with it beyond a coincidence. And I don't think he would admit to it. And the reason being is because that's the one thing he keeps from everybody. That he knows, I'm smarter than everybody else. And why this is. Because think of those 4 victims that Joe Naso got convicted of. The one we're talking about today, Roxene Rogash, Carmen Colon, Tracy Tafoya, which we'll get to, obviously, and Pam Parsons. What's the chance that all 4 are going to have double initials? What's the likelihood? When's the last time you walked into a bar and looked around at your local watering hole and could point out one person that has double initials? It's hard. Possibility versus probability. It is possible that all 4 of those victims that he got convicted for were just luck of the draw that they had double initials. But in my mind, I think it's more probable than not that they were targeted. Okay? So, let's get into Roxene Rogash. January 10th, 1977, Roxene Rogash was found dead near Fairfax, California. 4 pairs of female pantyhose were wrapped around her body. I mean, that's not MO. That's signature. Okay? If you want to know the difference between MO and signature, well, buy this book and watch this video. So I always get the question, how do you become a cold case detective? Ken Maines, how did you become a cold case detective? Well, I had that in mind a long time ago, over 10 years ago, and I got the answer right here. Mastering Cold Case Investigations, a guidebook for detectives. I wrote this 550-page behemoth for that purpose, because when I was in high school, when I was in college, and then when I became a detective, I wanted to know more about cold cases, why they go cold, why are they unsolved? Is it evidence? Is it lack of determination? Is it perseverance? Is it politics? All the above. Well, I set the answer to all those questions in my new book. It's been 10 years of research, writing, jotting down things. I knew that I was going to write this book eventually, and it finally has come to a head where I'm able to actually get it done, get it published by Unsolved No More Publishing, and get it out to you. So who's this book for? It's for detectives. It's for amateur detectives. It's for college students, academia, forensics. The topics I cover in this book, from what is a cold case, victimology, research, crime scene location, criminal profiling, conflict, greed, sex and revenge, possibilities versus probabilities. That is huge in this book. I go through that a lot because that's the basis and foundation of my methodology. Evidence, sketches. Of course, you have affirmations. Why should you listen? Social media, the rule of psychology, equivocal deaths, modus operandi, signature. Legal and ethical considerations in cold cases, integrity, involving as a cold case detective, serial killers, missing persons, domestic violence, exposing myths, premeditation versus spontaneous, confidential informants, wrongly convicted, clandestine graves, you name it. I cover it in here. 550-page hardcover textbook. And along with all those topics, I also wanted to do case studies, especially case studies on confessions. Why? Because you can learn so much from confessions. At the end of the book, I go in great detail about killers in general who have confessed, why they did it, and what we can learn. That's always the most important thing, what we can learn from them and move forward and apply what we learned on that case to a future case. So I have all that. I tried to incorporate as much as I could, and there's a lot in there about real life cases that I have worked on and I have either solved or learned something from. And I'll tie that to a specific chapter, along with tips, certain things that I think you should look for in certain areas. It's a great book to learn from. But it's not just for active law enforcement members, private investigators, defense attorneys. Everybody can learn from this book. And that is what is motivated me to write this, is I want people to learn. I am tired of seeing wrongfully convicted people. I'm tired of the politics of district attorneys' offices and state police and local jurisdictions who either don't have the resources to do it or they just pass it off because they don't know how, they don't want to, they don't have the desire, the determination. And all that does is affect the victims and the victims' families. And I see it time and time again. You will see endorsements and affirmations from victims' family members in here who I've worked with in the past because they are the most important people. To pass off what I have learned to you so you can be a great investigator, you can be a great detective, and you can solve cases just like I do. Get your copy now. I'll sign it. I'll get it out to you and start learning. That way we can start solving cold cases together. Now, 4 pairs were wrapped around her body. One was worn by Roxanne. That was Joe's thing. Police concluded that she had been dead for only a day. She was 18. Rogash was suspected of being a prostitute. Her family denied this. And again, I would never want to tarnish anybody's legacy or memory, especially to their loved ones that are out there. So I won't comment on that at all. But again, Naso's DNA and the DNA of his wife were found on those pantyhose. Now, that's what the police released. What's the truth? What happened? Is there more to the story? Of course there are. And this comes from Bill Nagara. The victim entered Naso's vehicle voluntarily. There was no forced pickup. I believe that he knew who Roxanne already was, and she had the double initials, and she was going to be the victim. The assault and murder occurred inside Naso's apartment. This was after he photographed her. Of course, she was raped, blunt force trauma, and also choking the victim. Ligature strangulation was used using the pantyhose. That's classic Joe Naso. The victim was photographed before and after her death. Again, that's classic Joe Naso, and we have proof of that. And I will show you when we get to the Pam Parsons and Tracy Tafoya cases. Personal items were taken as souvenirs. He continues to do that, and he is not unlike other serial killers in that aspect. The body was transported in the vehicle trunk. Again, he's done this before, and he'll do it again. And remember, a lot of times serial killers will do what they were successful with. For example, and they adapt. I always go back to Ted Bundy and his first victim and how he broke into a house, assaulted her in her room, and then had to get her out of that house and transport her to another location so he could kill her and further do his dastardly deeds. He realized that took a lot of work, and it was also very risky. You know, he could be seen, heard. He's going into their environment and removing them. Now, he's gone into their environment before, but not pulling them out and taking them with. So he creates and he adapts and uses the ruse of a broken arm to get them to his vehicle. Now he only has to move them a few feet, maybe, after he knocks them unconscious and puts them in the vehicle. He adapted to that. So when he realized, hey, me using a ruse, getting into my car works, I'm going to continue doing that. Joe Naso is, the same way. Hey, I'm going to transport her in my trunk. That seems to work. And that's how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to get them back to my studio or my apartment where I have camera equipment set up. And I'm going to use that ruse because it works. Why change it? A very small detail, and I'm a big fan of small details because sometimes when you see that, that tells you the validity of the information that you get. One of the things that Joe told Bill about putting a body into the trunk, or specifically in his trunk, that he disabled the trunk light. I like that small detail because to me it tells you everything about Joe Naso and how careful he was. The dump site was near Loganitas Road. Obviously, he expressed no remorse talked more about the list of 10 when he was talking about Roxene Rogash as number 3. It wasn't that she was the third person that he killed. It was more of the sexual experience of killing them. She was the third best in Joe Naso's mind. And I know that Roxene Rogash's brother was pretty prevalent at the trial from what I read. And I'm glad that she had somebody there champion for her. And, you know, it's so sad when I think about these victims and how young they are, and they had no chance to grow up and have kids of their own or have a life. Or if, let's say, they were in a bad situation, they didn't have a chance to turn that around. And that's what always strikes me. But Roxene Rogash, she's number 3 on Joe Naso's list of 10. And he was convicted of what I think was the strongest case in her murder. So that's it. That's all I have on Roxene. But now the next episode is where things are going to get interesting. Because our next episode is going to be number 4 on the list. And what is the number 4 on the list? Girl on Mount Tam. Okay. Doesn't say girls. Girl, singular. Although he admitted, and I will show you the notes, that he placed 2 women on Mount Tam. So which one is he talking about here? And I'll get into that on the next episode. Because for the show, I think we identified Pamela Lampson as the girl on Mount Tam. 1977. Yes, that's true, but it's not true. And I'll explain what I mean in the next episode. And the next episode, I'm going to need your help when I show photographs of who I believe who he's referring to as number 4 on the list, girl on Mount Tam. The girl on Mount Tam was focused heavily on the television show, and for good reason. A lot of information that Joe gave about the girl on Mount Tam. It was a beautiful place, Mount Tam. And when I started researching this case, I was shocked. Shocked how many serial killers are related to Mount Tam. I'm just working on a case recently. A girl's brother was murdered back in the 70s. And the accused is a serial killer. And I'm reading through his police reports, and I see that he abducted a couple on Mount Tam and forced them to drive him somewhere. I was like, geez, Mount Tam again. Seems to be everywhere. So it should be a good episode. Stay tuned to the next episode, and we're starting to get into this now, and where I'm going to need your help on some unknown cases. Roxene Rogash is a known case. Carmen Colon is a known case, but the girl on Mount Tam isn't known. And what you saw on the television show, that's only an eighth of the information that we have to share, or I have to share with you. So stay tuned to that. I'm going to leave you with some evidence, some of the stalkings and his fetish with the stalkings from search warrant photos and from evidence taken from his house that may or may not have made it to the police department. But these are actual photographs from Joe Naso's property. So with that said, hey, thanks for watching. Maine's out.